Hi, my name's Anne Marie Leahy, and I work in career services at Santa Monica College. And I'm going to talk to you right now about interviewing. So, the first thing I think we have to acknowledge here is that interviews are terrifying. My job is to help students prepare for interviews, and I'll be honest, I have never gone on an interview and not felt terrified. So, for me, it's not about how to move forward without fear, it's about how to move forward in spite of fear. And the best advice I can give you to prepare is that many people think that they can just wing it and that there's a natural magic that's going to happen. I promise you that's not the case. Um, I think we need to think about interviewing as a sport or like riding a bike. You really need to understand how it works and train your muscles to be ready for to perform, right? Like you're not gonna go have your first time playing baseball be on the Dodgers at Dodger Stadium, right? Like you're gonna practice first. You're gonna work your way up to that. So it's kind of it's a weird comparison, but it works. You need to train yourself. You need to train your mind and practice to become more comfortable talking about yourself because it's not a normal experience or a comfortable one. So, but practice really does help. Just like when riding a bike, eventually it starts to feel a little bit more normal. So, but before we get into how to prepare for the interview, I do want to remind you that if you're looking at this because you're getting prepared to go on an interview, remember that you were selected to go on this interview. So just take a moment to acknowledge that and give yourself some credit and realize that what the employer saw on your resume and in your portfolio, they were impressed enough that they wanted to know more. So you already know that you have what it takes to show up and have a conversation with them. And that's all it is, right? It's just a conversation. So now that you know that they already believe that you can do the job, you have to realize that the interview is just an opportunity for you to tell the employer a little bit more information and some stories around the information that you included on your resume. And it's an opportunity for you to share some of your work that you've highlighted in your portfolio. So, when we talk about interview preparation, um, there are really a few tips that you can kind of go through each time, right? I do this every time I have to go in an interview myself personally. So I review the job description and the resume that I submitted with my application because you want to remember again they're calling you in because of what you told them on your resume. So make sure you're looking at the right version of your resume and that you're looking at the job description again so that you can connect the dots for them about how you have done will help you with what you are going to do for them. You definitely want to research the company you're applying to. Hopefully, you already have, but if you haven't, definitely go through their website. Look at the projects and initiatives that they're working on. Think about what excites you about those projects and initiatives. Think about who their competition is, right? Just have an idea of what's going on. Think of it as your company. If somebody shows up and they ask you, what do you do? Or somebody shows up and says, I saw that you just did this and I thought that was really exciting and innovative. I saw that your competition is doing this. Are you concerned about that? Are you thinking about doing something to respond to that? Coke versus Pepsi, whatever. So it just makes for a more interesting conversation, right? You're probably going to want to hire the person that knows a little bit about what you're doing and where you're going. So you can get that information on Google. Google can tell you everything, in the company website. Also, practicing speaking your answers out loud to the most common interview questions. And I'm going to tell you something. Some people say, go ahead, look in the mirror. I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to look in the mirror. I know what I look like. That's not for me, right? If that's for you, great. Um, but I will tell you that it's quite different to write out your answers, to think about your answers, and to say them out loud, right? Let's go back to the bike analogy. You can think about riding a bike, but actually riding the bike is a different thing. That's where that muscle memory kicks in. So honestly, like, I'll go into my bathroom and shut the door and talk to myself just so I can hear myself and just get used to the words coming out of my mouth. Often I'll write my answers out to the interview questions, just to brainstorm. And then when I say them out loud, I end up rewriting them because I sound like a robot. So it's an important step just to get comfortable having those words come out of your mouth. Let's see. You can research industry specific questions. And I think we kind of covered that. Know what's happening not only at the company but in that space. If it's fashion, do they have an online presence? Are they an on-ground store, brick and mortar as they call it? Are they planning on entering the online space, right? So that's a weird example, but it's an example just so that you know what's happening, right? What are the trends? The trends are for online, and how are you entering that space? So also Glassdoor is a great resource. Sometimes people actually post interview questions that you can expect from various companies on there. Also, just to give you an idea, like you can do like a Google search, what can I expect for an interview from a specific company or in a specific industry, right? And when you research like graphic design or IXD, you're going to see that they're going to tell you to be prepared to present a case study, right? So one of your projects from your portfolio. Also, you can also ask, a career counselor or a faculty member or anybody that that's currently working in the industry, what was your interview like? What should I prepare for? And you may get some great tips on what questions to expect and prepare for. Clothing. That's just a small one, but it never hurts, right? You just kind of want to think about what you're wearing beforehand. You don't want to be struggling for that at the last moment. You want to, black pants and a dress shirt are always a safe choice. Suits are generally not required unless you're going for a finance position. You don't want to show up in sweatpants or jeans typically, even if it's kind of the environment that you could get away with that on a regular basis. For the interview, you want to kind of put your best foot forward. You want to have your hair combed. You want to be showered, not too much cologne or perfume. Just make a nice impression, right? So we included some pictures of some looks that could be considered appropriate. And you just don't want to think about anything the day of your interview, so the more you prepare in advance, the better. The other advice that I would give you is when you are going to an interview. So, if it's going to be an on-site interview on ground, you want to have the address, you want to have the directions. If you want to do a test drive early, because I'm going to tell you something, if you show up late and you say, oh, I didn't know how long it was going to take me to get there, that is a bad impression, not on your first impression. It's better to be an hour early and sit in your car than to be 10 minutes late for an interview. Again, it's your first impression, and most people show up on time. The ones that get the job show up on time. So make sure you know where you're going, that you're comfortable, you know where you're going to park. Make sure that you bring with you, print out on a piece of paper, write it down on a piece of paper, the name of who set up the interview with you and who you are interviewing with. You don't want to show up and say, hey, I'm here for an interview, and then they say, well, with who, where, for what? You need to have all of those answers, because it's your job to know that, not theirs. And always bring at least 2 extra copies of your resume, cover letter, and references with you to the interview. Don't assume that they're going to have a copy of it. I always bring them with me. Better to be looking at it than for it, right? You don't want to be caught not having it. And also, you can take that moment prior to being called into the interview to kind of read over it again to refresh your memory of some of the things you want to talk about, because the resume is essentially the script for the interview. Always also, it's nice to bring a blank sheet of paper and a pen to make notes after the interview. And always, 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 always have questions that you want to ask the employer, because I don't think I've ever been in an interview where they said, do you have any, where they didn't say, do you have any questions for me? So always have questions. And those questions should be, related to the work that you'll be doing. But I have some tips on that. Now, for online, if you're doing an online interview, make sure that you have a backup plan. A lot of times, if you're doing it on Google or like Google Hangout or Zoom or whatever, and you have a Wi-Fi issue, make sure that you have somebody's phone number. Make sure that you have the phone number call-in for Zoom, so that if your Wi-Fi goes out, you can still join that call from your cell phone. You can continue to keep the meeting going. If you have a visual to show them, make sure that you have their email address, because if you lose a screen share, then you need to email them a copy of your document and walk them through it on the phone, right? Be resourceful. That's what they're looking for, is a problem solver. And of course, make sure that the location that your Zoom camera has is of where you're sitting during the interview is clean and not distracting, and that there's not people running around in the background. So even if you have to, again, go outside and do it from your phone someplace so that you can have some privacy. So those are my notes on that. Let's see. And then interview day, you can be calm. You've done everything. You've prepared, right? You arrive early. Again, 15 minutes is kind of standard. Half an hour is maybe a little too early. I usually arrive at least a half an hour early, but I sit in my car until it's going to be 15 minutes before, and then I walk in and introduce myself and have a seat. Be very courteous and professional to everyone. Sometimes the person at that front desk has more influence that's checking you in than you have any idea. So, always in life you should be courteous, but just to remind you of that. During the interview, you want to make sure your cell phone is off. You want to make sure you're not chewing gum or playing with your hair. You want to think of yourself, again, it's a conversation. You're problem solving with them. These are going to be your teammates. How are you going to work together? Think of this as like an interview to work on a group project, right, for class. Don't be afraid to ask them questions, because it's a conversation, and show your enthusiasm. Even if you're scared, that kind of fake it till you make it thing, where you show some enthusiasm in the company and interacting with them. Don't let the fear take over your acting abilities. And then if it's appropriate, at the end, and if you don't already have their names, you kind of want to leave somehow with the names and titles of anybody that you interviewed with, so you can write a thank you note. Perhaps your friend at the front desk that checked you in can give that to you, but if you have a moment to jot anything down or it's appropriate, you can ask for that information, and take a moment to write it down. Typically, you can send a thank you letter to the person who set up the interview and ask them to forward it also to the people that you met with, whose names you will write down and know. And then never, never, never be afraid. If they don't tell you what the next steps are, ask them. What are the next steps? Oftentimes I'll meet with students and they'll say, oh, well, when should I follow up with them? And I say, well, what did they tell you? And they say, oh, they didn't say anything. I said, oh, okay, well, you need to ask. So what are the next steps? Which means, and if they need clarification, you can tell them, when are you making your hiring decision, right? So maybe they're making it in 2 weeks, and after 2 weeks, you move on to the next opportunity if you haven't heard from them. Maybe it's 3 months. You want a sense, because typically we're looking at multiple jobs at the same time. So it helps you kind of plan and know when to move forward. And always thank the interviewers at the end. And then just be glad you survived, and I know you can do it. So after the interview, again, you can send thank you notes. You can remind them of your qualifications for the job, confirm your interest again. Reference any connection that you had with them. If they, if they gave you any specific feedback on your work, you can thank them. If you connected that with them on, being a sci-fi junkie or whatever you connected on, you can let them know that. Never tell them that you're so excited about what they can do for you, right? It's more about, this has confirmed my interest. Your team is great. I really loved the experience and your thoughts on XYZ. You just, it's a reiteration of your interest. And you can open the door for any questions to be asked if they felt like anything was missing, right? So that's a little bit on a thank you note. And then I'll just really quickly tell you, there's really 7 interview questions that tend to get asked. I'm not saying that these are going to be asked to you in an interview, but they are the most common interview questions, so you might as well prepare for them. And again, it just, if nothing else, it helps you practice talking about yourself. Typically, you will be asked, tell me about yourself. So this does not mean I like long walks on the beach, my favorite ice cream is chocolate. No, they don't care about that, right? It means, what education and experience do you have that will help you be successful at this job? So you're going to tell them where you are. You're a current student at Santa Monica College with XYZ major, and you've done a lot of mobile app development, and that's what this job is asking for. You can talk about your strengths. You really love applying user research to your projects. Here's an example, always an example of a class project or something that you worked on to prove your passion and your experience. This was my assignment, this was the result, and here are the skills that I used to accomplish it, and I'm excited to use these at your company. That's it. So all of these questions at the end of the day are an opportunity for you to talk about projects that you've worked on. So many of them will have a similar feeling to them. Why should we hire you? Again, it's an opportunity to talk about your education and your experience, and like a success story of something that you did. Again, I lean on class projects because often those are the most relevant to the work that you will be doing at a job. Now you can certainly use experience from, like, if you work at Best Buy, you could use that experience as well. But sometimes it's an easier correlation for them if they hear problem solving in your stories related to problems that you would be solving on the work. So if you were developing that mobile app and you ran into a bump, how did you overcome it? And then they can say, oh, okay, so when they're designing that mobile app for us, that's what they're going to do. Okay, cool, right? So it just makes it more obvious to them. Greatest strengths. I'm just going to go through these really quickly. Obviously, this will be available for you to pause and go through and take more specific notes and craft out your answers too, right? But greatest strength, again, it's about the strengths that companies want you to have. And again, you highlight it with a story. This is when you applied that strength. Greatest weakness. This one tends to be the hardest one for students. You want to show that you're self-aware. I mean, you really need to think about what it is. Like, I've had students, I had one student that say, I know it's really hard for me to get to the point. And I said, hey, there you go. There's your weakness. Okay. But it can't be a critical one for your position. It can't be something that, like, if the job, again, I'll say mobile app development, and your weakness is you're not very good at mobile app development, that's not the one. That's not the weakness to pick. You better find a different one. So, for that student that, didn't know how to get to the point, then they can follow up, which was kind of obvious in the interview, right? In the mock interview. So, what are you doing? You can say that, but then you need to say, what are you doing so that you are better at that? How are you working on that? How are you overcoming that? So, perhaps it's, when you're going to prepare for a meeting, you make a list of the points that you know that you need to address, and you hit those points, and you move on. Whatever it is, honestly, it's really best if it is genuine, because to me, then the interviewer can say, oh, I can see that example in real life right in front of me right now, right? But at least I know they're aware of it, and at least I know they're working on it. So that's just a good opportunity for self-reflection. Why do you want to work for us? This is what do you know about the company, their values, their projects, what are they working on in the industry they're in. So that's, we talked about that in the beginning, that you go on Google, that you go on their website, that you follow their social media. See what they're working on, and see how it connects to you. That's your opportunity there. Describe a difficult work situation and what you did to overcome it. Again, this could be a group project at school. This could be, over at Best Buy. This just shows your problem solving process. So again, a specific story. And never say negative things about other people in the story. Only focus on yourself and your role and what you did to problem solve. And then the final one is, do you have any questions for me? Really, just, do you have any questions for me? And we talked about that before as well. When you look at the industry and what they're doing and what that company's doing, maybe you want to know about the person who's interviewing you. They asked you a million questions about yourself. Maybe you want to know about them. What is their background? How did they end up there? How do they like working there? What advice could they have for you to be most prepared to hit the ground running? There's a million questions. There's some listed below that you can consider, but never say that you don't have any questions. And it's not the appropriate moment to ask about salary or benefits, or what you can get from them, or questions that you can easily find the answer to online. So one thing that's important to bear in mind when you're going on an interview for a business position, often finance, consultancy, positions like that, you will be presented with a case study. They're often referred to as case study interviews, right? So what does that mean? A case study interview is a job interview that includes questions about how to handle a specific job situation. So what they're really looking for is you to showcase your thinking, your problem solving skills, your analytical skills. So it's never about being right or wrong with your answer. It's more an opportunity for you to display how you think about things and how you problem solve. So for example, you might be asked to determine how big the market might be for a new tennis ball, right? So that's not a lot of information. So it's okay to make it a conversation. Don't panic when you're asked a question like that, right? Just like slow down, take a deep breath, and ask some questions. Who's the target consumer? How much do the tennis balls cost? Are they going to be sold online or in store, right? So just all the kind of things that you would kind of think about if you had to sell a product, right? It doesn't matter what it is that you're selling, but these are some standard questions that you might want to think about as a business owner. So they're going to say, oh, okay, they're going to consider who the consumer is, how they can reach the consumer. Now they're not actually expecting you to come up with the number like 1 billion, no, don't worry about that. You'd say, well, I would pull the demographics. I would research, how many people. First you identify who your consumer is, then you identify how to target them, right? So you could just talk about the research that you would do to get you to that answer, if that makes sense. So it's not that you have to have the answer, it's that you want to have some sort of thought process as to how you would get to that answer. And there's no right or wrong. There's a million ways that you can do things. It's just a conversation. So kind of enjoy the challenge. It's like it's you want to take this as kind of like an exciting challenge. Like, okay, well, I never thought about that before. But hopefully you will think about this because you want to think about how you would run a business. Maybe spend some time on Google and review maybe some old class notes so that you can see, different things that you need to think about when you're opening a business, and be prepared with the questions like that, just so that you sort of can demonstrate that you have a process, right? A series of questions that you'll go through when you run into situations. And that's all it's really about. Just a couple of quick tips on that. Just make sure that you understand whatever the question is that they're asking you. If you're not clear, definitely ask questions. Ask them a question back, right? It's a conversation at that point. You can take notes on what they're telling you, and then take a moment. Again, it's all about taking that breath, taking that moment. This is not a race. You don't have to answer quickly. You can take a moment to think. People know it's expected that you're going to take a moment to think about it. So take a breath, think about your process, think about the questions that you're going to ask the questions, and then involve in a discussion, a problem-solving discussion. You definitely want to stay professional, right? Don't be too casual. This is not, you're not, it seems very casual, like it's buddy buddy, but it's not. It's still professional. It's still problem solving. So still sit up straight, speak clearly, make eye contact, and it's okay again to be slow and thoughtful, but remain engaged and try and have some fun with it, because it is exciting. This is hopefully, you're in this industry because these challenges are fun and exciting to you. And these are potential partners that you're going to have in this problem solving process in the future. So hopefully those are some good tips. The final tip is practice, 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 practice. So this article that I sourced for this had also referred to Bain and Company. If you Google Bain and Company, they have some case interview questions along with some tips. So you can just kind of practice, see what they look like so that you can kind of identify them when you're asked them in your interview, and you'll see how other people have handled them, right? And again, of course, always feel free to reach out to Career Services. We'll help you practice, but definitely recommend that you do the research, do some Google, visit the site, check them out, do some practicing, and then you can practice with us, and we're super happy to help you. So you have our contact information. We want to make sure that you ace the interview, or at least have a good time and learn something along in the process. And we look forward to working with you.